I am Mike Severns, and this is the Hungry Realtor Podcast. Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Hungry Realtor Podcast with me, Mike Severns at Hungry Realtor. Please be sure to like, follow, and share. Joining me today is Jim Smith. Jim, thanks for joining me. Jim is the founder and CEO of a company called Proper Sky. Jim, tell us, the audience, a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am a Sagittarius. I'm more of a puppy dog guy than a cat guy. And if I could really be who I wanted to be, I'd probably be a pole dancer, Mike. And that is true. I founded Proper Sky, run a managed IT services company, which is code for outsourcing. We help small to medium-sized businesses in and around Philadelphia and throughout the country in terms of security, servers, workstations, switches, all that sort of stuff. So we manage everything soup to nuts for a lot of businesses here in the Delaware Valley. And been doing that for 16 years and dabble in real estate, which I think is why I'm on here today, to hang out and talk church.
Yeah, Jim, that's absolutely why you are here today, because you are very much the everyman, right? You have your own company, you work hard, but then you do this real estate as well. And that's who I want to address today, is somebody who may not be in it for a career. They don't want their career to be investments or being a landlord. They don't want their whole thing to be about it. I thought today would be a good chance to show that you can have a career that you love and be a success at and still do real estate at the same time. Tell me a little bit about how the real estate game came into your life.
My wife and I bought our first place in Mount Airy, Philadelphia, right? So we were living in an apartment in the Art Museum area, which for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath in like 2006, it was like $300,000, which at the time I was like, there's no way I'm paying for on-street parking at $300,000 for a 900 square foot brownstone near Girard Ave. So anyway, we landed in Mount Airy, and we lived in Mount Airy from probably, let's say, I think we bought the house in 2008 at the height of the sort of real estate collapse, right?
My wife and I bought our first house at the same time.
Yeah.
Great time.
So yeah, exactly. And I forget what we paid. We were kids. We didn't really know what we were doing, right? We bought the place. I want to say we bought it for $212,000, I think was the first, what we bought it for. And then my wife was like, hey, well, I want to have a baby, right? So she pulled the goalie, we get a baby, and she's like, the house is too small. And I think this is a pretty common trajectory, right? For a lot of first-time couples. We figure out where we're going to go. We find a great place out in Paoli, which was our second house, right? Our forever house. We're getting ready to move out to Paoli, and we realized that the house is underwater. So the top line, I think at that time we would get when we were selling was for $180,000. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to take a $30,000 haircut plus whatever commissions and fees are on this house. So I was forced into landlordship, I guess is probably the best way to do it or describe it. And I just said, you know what? I'm just going to rent this place. So I figured out all the pieces that I needed to do and then just put the place up on the market. I knew the bones were good. I knew the house was good. The structure was good. And I knew that my market rate was fair. I think I lost money the first few years just because, but I figured, you know what? I'll eat that cost. And I know eventually in the long run, I'll make up some money. So that's how I got started.
What were some lessons that you learned early on from that experience of being a new landlord that you think the audience should know?
Number one, trust their credit report.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a huge lesson, right? So I had some very beautiful people show up that had 550s and everything looked good on paper. Landlord and references were great, but then you run the credit check. And I think I had somebody in there for maybe a month or two. And I actually had to, I think they abandoned the place, if I recall correctly. They ended up just leaving and skipping town, which actually was good for me.
You
So
didn't have to spend the money on the eviction.
Yeah, exactly. And then not only that, but I figured out what was going on. I realized I was never going to see that rent and that they had skipped and, they didn't do too much damage or anything like that. So I did a lot of that. I background checks. And then the other thing that really helped, I think, find good tenants is I started calling the actual landlords of the people that live there.
Oh, interesting.
And then I would ask the landlord how many properties they owned and what were the locations. And I would actually do a background check on the landlord because I actually had some people give me references to fake landlords.
Oh, wow.
Right? Which is clever. Clever as all get out, dude. And I was like, this is smart. And so I was like, yeah, what's the name of the place that you own? Oh, that's is it yours? Is it in your name? Oh, yeah. And then I do the deed search that night and see if it actually was that landlord. Then I collect the feedback. And the funny thing is when you talk from one landlord to another landlord, it's like this fraternity of brothers. You know what I mean? It's like you share the same pain. So landlords are pretty honest and opening up to other landlords. So they like, oh yeah, they paid their bill on time. They were late maybe 2 or 3 times. I probably lost the deposit on the clean out. All in all, I probably regret something again. And that's really what you're looking at. I think the other secret that I've made is I actually dropped the rent lower and got pickier on tenants. So I would rather have somebody that could take care of the house than have to manage or deal with somebody that was absolutely unreasonable or charge a high-end premium and expect additional services. With my first place, those were 3 of the key lessons I had. After I had that bad tenant in the beginning, and somebody was there for a couple of years. I had another group that was there for 3 years, and the last tenant's been there for almost 7 at this point, right?
Nice.
Yeah, so really 2024. So yes, forever. They've been there forever, right? Which is great. And they take care of the house. They never call me, and it just makes money and pays the mortgage, which is great.
Wow, that is an outstanding story. Now, as you've grown in the real estate world, what are some other opportunities that you've taken advantage of besides just falling into being a landlord because your home was on the water?
Life is compound interest. The second property, my wife and I bought our place in Paoli. We lived there for about a year. We realized that the commute was a little too much for both of us. So we ended up selling that house and moving down to Delaware County, which is where we live now, which is right outside the suburbs of Philly here. And we bought a really nice place. And we actually timed it pretty well. The place had sat on the market for over a year. And then we watched the price come down about 20%. And then while we came in to negotiate, we got a pretty good deal on the place and negotiated. Yeah, you said something on your podcast earlier, your money's made on the purchase, which is true. You know what I mean? Not the sale, which is interesting. Anyway, we bought that place. And then I guess the second property we purchased was, so during COVID, everybody's sitting around at home and we're like, we're going to put a pool in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's where it started. My wife said, you know what, let's put a pool in. So we look in the backyard. We have a tiny backyard because we had a pool at our place in Paoli and I had 1 acre. And I was like, man, I'm not spending another Saturday ever again, like spending my whole weekend ripping out poison ivy. Like I'm done. So I just wanted something low maintenance, easy to deal with or whatever. So our new place, the place we're living in now, is a small yard, very small footprint. But with COVID, the kids loved the pool. We were stuck in the house and we were like, let's get it. Right. So because we had such a small backyard, we had to deal with the township to get a variance. And they're like, if you want to get a variance, you really need to get an attorney. So we get the attorney. The attorney takes a look at the backyard. He says, it's far too small. You're going to have to get a groundwater survey and a permeable surface study. And we're going to have to do all this stuff. We started adding up all the costs to get an expert witness and to get all these studies. It was like, I would say $13,000 before you even sunk the shovel. And I'm like, okay. So then we call the pool people. The pool people are like, hey, get in line. Everybody in America wants a pool right now. So it'll be at least 7 months till we can get out and put a fiberglass pool in your backyard. And that's if we got the zoning variance. So my wife and I were like, all right, let's take a ride down the beach. So we drove down to a bunch of little neighborhoods in and around the Chesapeake Bay and then up and down the Jersey coast for 5 or 6 weekends. And the irony, Mike, is I went to Wildwood every summer of my entire youth, from probably the age of 2 until the age of 16, but I'd never seen Cape May ever.
Oh, wow.
Until 2021. So on a random Sunday, we got up and we are just like, let's go check out Cape May. And I walked into Cape May and I was like, man, I love this town. I love the vibe. It's got the Jersey Shore thing, but it's not Jersey Shore and it's a little bit long to get to and we liked it. So remember that weekend we went back down and we started looking around for properties. So what year was this? We're in probably 2020. Interest rates were phenomenal. I think the rates for houses were 2 to 2.5 for a credit score the where we had. And we landed on this little place. It was a little beach bungalow and they wanted $525 for it. And we felt like it was $100,000 too much. But we started driving around. We went all over Cape May and we were like, we just kept coming back to this little place. And we called up a real estate guy and we're like, hey, what do you think of this place? That place has been sitting for a year. Nobody wants it. She's got a price too high. Let me call the agent and see if they want to make a deal. So he did. He called up and he says, you're not going to believe this. They're taking last and final offers tonight. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, if you guys are really interested in the house, you have to put in a bid right now. We're like, okay. So we did. And I think we went at 515. And the lady, I think, had a builder that outbid us, but she didn't want to have a giant place next to it. So she gave it to us for just a little bit. We were pretty close at the end of the day. And so we won the house, which
Oh,
was
that's
great.
great. What did you do with it after you purchased it? Was it just a vacation home for you and your family?
My philosophy on this is if you can't afford to pay for the mortgage on your own, you shouldn't have a beach house. I think the
Okay.
first thing you got to do is you got to get cash flow positive because there'll be bad days and bad months or whatever. So we looked at that place, we put the deposit on it. And then my wife, the other advice I'd say is definitely marry up. That's the secret. So my wife has exquisite taste. She's a beautiful woman and she does an amazing job with design. So she had this vision for where she wanted to go. And when we built the place, the thing that I was thinking is I said, look, in order for us to afford this, we need to rent it. And I was like, what are all the things that drive me crazy when I stop into an Airbnb
Mm,
and the things I just don't wish I had to deal with? And so I was like, yeah, I don't want cheap silverware. I don't want knives that don't cut. I don't want pans that were bought from a flea market. I don't want tchotchkes all over the wall. I want sort of high-end accessories. I want them few and far between. I want clean lines. And when we put the place together, we definitely spent a lot of money on accessories and high quality finishings and fittings. And I was like, this is the kind of place that I would like to bring my family for vacation
mm.
if I was staying somewhere else. And I think that's the way we built it. And at the time, I think, Airbnb was brand new to me. It's been around for a while, but it's the first time I'd tried or anything like that. We went in and we basically renovated the whole place, soup to bottom. Right. And so we ripped everything out, redid the whole thing. We got lucky. We found this kid, Anthony Tancredi, in Tancredi Construction. It was his first job on his own.
Oh, wow.
And it was awesome. So we took a risk on him. He underpriced himself quite a bit, but he did an amazing job. He was a perfectionist, which is exactly what we wanted. It was in such a small place. I think it's like 1,000 square feet. And he really did a great job, did excellent. We renovated, we bought the place in February. We finished it up, I think, in June. And then we had a couple of weeks to ourselves and then we stuck it on the market for Airbnb. So
Can you discuss the success you had that first summer? How did it go? Was it something that took a while to get some traction, or did Airbnb really work for you at that time and get a lot of bookings?
we had the relationship with our realtor initially, right?
Okay.
And he was like, look, let me book some of these weeks for you. And we were like, yeah, that's great. And he had one guy that wanted the place for, I think, 5 weeks or
Oh,
six
wow.
weeks, our first summer. Right. And he's again, here's what I think you'll get. Maybe it's $2,000 a week or 2,500 a week. When I was like, this is great. We know that's going to cover the mortgage. It's going to help pay for a lot of this stuff. And this is fantastic. And I forgot what the total amount was, but it was pretty sizable. And that covered a big piece of it. For me, we live in, right outside of Philly. Cape May's a 2-hour drive, hour
Yeah.
and 40 minutes. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to come down here and fix the electric or
Right.
do any of that stuff. So the first thing I focused on was getting a property manager. We interviewed a bunch of people. I found one girl that was going to do it for a percentage of the rents, which is what I wanted. Um, but the thing I didn't like about her is she didn't want to do any weekly rentals. And at first I couldn't understand why. I was like, why wouldn't she want to do weekly rentals? But she got paid for every cleaning.
Mm.
So every time she flipped the house, she'd get paid $150 or $114 or whatever it was for her rate, in addition to the management fees. And so there's a few weeks in the beginning where I was renting it for 2 days or 3 days, like a Wednesday, Thursday, that people would come in. And that just created like pandemonium. So it was just like, you had to change the code on the door every 2 days. And then sometimes you'd accidentally change the cleaner's code and they couldn't get in, or the cleaners couldn't get to it because it was such a Saturday flip and they were busy. And so that was a little bit difficult. And I realized, I was like, you know what? This isn't that hard. I don't need somebody to manage this stuff. What I need is somebody local that I can trust to come in and help. We found a local property manager and we found a person that did sheets, linens.
Oh, cool.
And yeah. And so I interviewed a bunch of them. I found 2 that I really liked. And I was like, look, I'm going to need you guys because I'm in Philly. So can I call you if I have a problem? The other thing we found is a local landscaper, guy that lives right around the corner. And he did a great job. I trusted all 3 of those guys. If I needed somebody to go in the house or let a package in or something like that, I could pay him a few bucks and they'd swing by and just take care of it. So it was a pretty good relationship. So anyway, in terms of the money that we made that first summer, we got that big 6-week one. And then I was really surprised at how many people started staying into September and October that first year.
Mm.
And I realized now that my rates were probably below market, which was okay because we had people staying September, October into November And then I had somebody stay for 2.5 weeks in December that first year. And I was like, man, this place is, so we started renting Julie in 6 months. And I want to say we made $35,000 that first year.
Wow.
And I was like, this is crazy. This is awesome. I was like, fantastic. So then the next year, oh yeah. So anyway, I hope that answers your question.
No, you did. You
So
answered
that's
it. No, you're good.
yeah.
It was about that first 6 months, and it seems like it was very successful. Took off. It was the right timing for it. People were kind of cooped up for a year, and
Nobody wanted to get on an airplane. Everybody wanted to go down the shore, and they
Mhm.
all wanted the nice experience. Man, it was great, man. Couldn't have been better, actually.
and if somebody was lucky enough to keep their job and stay working the whole time, they had extra money because they weren't going out to eat. They weren't, going on vacation other places, and they got free money from everybody. Got free money, even people that still had their jobs. I redid my bathroom with it because I was lucky enough to still be able to sell real estate during the lockdowns and stuff.
It's a hot market too, dude.
Yeah, it was. 2020 has been my second best year in history. 2021 is my record breaker. I sold 55 houses that year.
Wow. That's more than 1 week, dude. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
it is.
That's incredible.
But I'm not here to brag or talk about me. I want to hear more about you. I want to know, like, when, other than trying to find somebody local and building that team up, what was the biggest challenge you faced as a vacation rental property owner now versus a regular landlord?
I think the volume of work, right? Go through this roller coaster where you're like, oh man, I got this beach house. I'm so proud of it. I can't wait to be down here all the time. And then you're like, I got a lot of bills to pay. So I got to definitely rent out some of this. And then you're like, okay, this is cool. They're like, oh man, look at all this money that I'm making. This is great. And then suddenly you're making money, but you're at a soccer game with your kids and somebody's calling you because you're out of shampoo. You're like,
Mm.
ah, man, just don't really want to deal with this stuff. So it goes up and down and you get on a sort of roller coaster of emotions. A couple of things that I learned, right? So one of the things that I personally believe in, so as opposed to renting below market for my first property, which I still do because there'd been such a good tenant, I actually raised my rates above market, right? So I bought a tool, price lapse is what it was, right? So my real estate guy was like, here's what you should be renting your place for. And I just took them at face value, right? So then I looked at all the comps once I got an Airbnb and I was like, whoa, I'm like 30% under market, man.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I put in the price labs data and I looked at the occupancy rates and I looked at the average daily rate of where similar houses rent. And I was like, my house is cuter and nicer and better. And so I'm going to raise my rates. And I did that until I felt like the volume cooled off and I wasn't getting these extra rentals in March and April. Because to be perfectly honest with you, that's the time when I like going down there. It's like they'll only get in March and the kids don't have football or soccer practice. And I want to sneak down on a Thursday night and go out to dinner with my wife and hang out on the beach with kids or just go for a walk. So that stuff was important to me. The other thing is you get in Airbnb, you get a lot of tire kickers in the off season, right?
Okay.
So what happens, particularly down the Jersey Shore, the help is very expensive. So so for me to get the property cleaned, and it's not a big property, it's at least $100 per cleaning for somebody to come in. And that's whether they stay one night or they stay 25 nights. It doesn't make a difference, right? The cleaner's fee is the cleaner's fee. And so I get these people that are trying to rent it for $100 a night. And then I have a $125 cleaning fee and a $75 lending fee. And they're like, oh, this just doesn't make sense to me. Can you get rid of those? I just want to pay $200. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
So initially I was like, yeah, definitely. I'll figure out a way to do it. And then those are the people that like call and complain. Those are the ones that are like, you know what, your hot water's not hot enough. And I don't want to deal with that stuff. We raised our rates. And the cool thing about Price Labs is what it does is it aggregates all the market data. And then each day it logs into your Airbnb account for you and then raises or reduces the rates based on market demand.
Oh, wow.
So if my house is like, let's say you want 4th of July weekend right now, you might be able to log in and get that week for $4,200, right? As the 4th of July approaches and the volume picks up for that week in searches, it'll actually raise the rate.
Oh, kind of like search
It
price.
corresponds. Yeah. So it'll do price spike. It'll do occupancy. It'll do all kinds of stuff. I think that's pretty cool. And I forget what the original question was, Mike. I got sidetracked.
No, it's all right. We're just having a conversation. And all that is a lot of great data. Just to recap, right? I asked you about some challenges, right? So it was finding a team, knowing how to price it,
Yep.
knowing who to trust, and Price Labs is the service that you use. And it seems like it's a great service, and it's set it and forget it because it can
Correct.
automatically do it for you. And
Yeah. you got to go. So that was the other thing. It took me about a month to figure it out because there's rules. One of the other
Okay.
things that I decided to do too is in the Jersey Shore, everybody stays Saturday to Saturday and they do weekly rentals. And that starts Labor Day weekend and that ends Memorial Day weekend. That's just typical. And so you'll probably get some rentals ahead of that and you'll get some rentals after that. But I decided that I was only going to do weekly rentals Saturday to Saturday. So the second season I did Saturday to Saturday. And the problem when you do Saturday to Saturday is every cleaner, air conditioning guy, whatever, is booked solid from 6 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. And getting somebody in there to take care of your property is a pain in the ass.
So you end up losing the whole thing. Something's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And so you tell people that they can't check in till 6 o'clock at night because the cleaners were late. And the cleaners were late because the laundry people at their last house had a spill and the HVAC guy couldn't get there. So it's just like this whole system. So what we did is we switched it. We went Sunday to Sunday. So this way everybody gets Friday night, Saturday night, and then they leave on Sundays. So the volume of people coming in and out of the beach is significantly less, and it's easier to get cleaners and people to help with stuff. Great. So that's another thing that we did. And then the other thing is like knowing my audience, right? I want families to stay there and I want nice families. So I want either somebody from the main line that's going to want to stay at my place for a nice weekend, just a Jersey getaway, or I want a family from the greater Northeast that saved up a few bucks and wants to have a nicer experience. What I don't want is 15 college kids pulling out all the sofas and crashing in my place. I don't want bridal showers. I don't want bachelor parties. I don't want any of that stuff. I basically just want to keep it to families. And that's another thing that I learned. And there's a fine line with Airbnb. You got to walk it very carefully because they want to sell and you can't discriminate. But it is your place, right? But if you say no to 3 or 4 people, it hurts your reputation and can definitely damage your stuff. So you got to make sure that you're really gearing the ad and speaking to the people that you want to stay there in order to make sure that you're maximizing your safety and value.
Yeah, it's funny that you say something like that, gear your ad towards who you want. When I was first starting in real estate back in 2014, I had a mentor tell me, you're going to catch the fish that you use the bait for. So at the time, I was doing a lot of advertising on down payment assistance and no money down programs and things like that. And he was like, Mike, listen, these people deserve service, but that's not who you want to advertise to because those are the hardest deals to close. Because if the seller doesn't have any money and the buyer doesn't have any money and there's a bunch of stuff in the inspections, that deal's going to fall apart because nobody can afford to fix anything and they're not willing to accept any credits or do anything, make a compromise. He told me, just be careful with that. And then I shifted and my average price went up but I did less deals, but my average price went up. So I made more money off the small, also lower transactions the next year. So it ended up working out. I would help anybody, but I just didn't advertise for that particular subset of customer anymore.
Yeah, that's great advice in life and everything else, right? So it's pick your poison, right? Just make sure you understand your market for sure. Yeah.
Now, about understanding your market, what strategies did you use for finding potential renters, and what has been more successful for you? Is it just putting it on Airbnb? Is that enough?
Well, it's funny because I had the real estate company, right? And so they were in the mix that first season. They got me that long rental. They helped me with a couple of rentals the second season. But when I submitted my prices, they were like, these prices are outrageous. You're not going to get these rates. And I said, dude, like we were 100% occupied from May until the end of September, right? So I am getting these prices. This is what I want you to list them at. And there's some advantages to going through a realtor. And I actually like our realtor. He's a great guy. I think he's a good person. But in terms of rental, what we saw is it was a lot and then it was less and then it was less just because Airbnb just dominated, right? We're also on VRBO. I don't advertise as heavily on VRBO as I do on Airbnb just because we just get the volume from Airbnb. So I made Superhost. I don't know how I did that. I'm not even sure what the rules are for that, but it just celebrates me every time I call in. And I just try to think, how do I want to be treated when I'm on vacation? You know what I mean? If somebody calls me up and tells me that the shower's broken, get a goddamn plumber over there.
So when you say advertise on Airbnb, is there like a Facebook ads section within Airbnb where you can pay to promote your home over the other ones? Is that something you're taking advantage of? Or you're just, when you say advertise, you just mean, I post my listing on Airbnb?
Yeah, that's a good question. I just posted on Airbnb. I know VRBO had a paid search function.
Okay.
When I first signed up for VRBO, they were like, get on the homepage. And I was like, yeah.
Okay.
And then I realized that I had to take a 50% discount on the rent. And
Ooh.
I was like, no,
Yeah, that's tough. That's
no.
high.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And they're like, yeah, get your name out there, get your first 3 reviews and become VRBO certified. And I was like, I'll get them eventually. I'm not in a rush.
Mhm.
And then I don't even know if Airbnb has a marketing platform. It would surprise me if they don't have a premier host or some sort of paid platform, but I don't have to, right? Because let's see, what are we in? This is my fourth season. I'm going to say at this point, without doing any additional advertising, I probably get 30% of my rentals are people that have already stayed
Oh,
of the
nice.
house and want to come back.
That's
Right.
great.
Yeah. They text me and say, hey, I stayed here last July. It was $2,800 for the week or $3,300 for the week. Can I do the same price? And I look back and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. These guys were great tenants. They reached out to me directly. And it's weird. I give them a little bit of a break. I know I've got a good tenant in there and they get the house for the weekend or for the week.
That's awesome. 30% return is for repeat customers is a great ratio. It shows that you're not only is the house a nice house, but you're providing a great service as a host. So I know that not every town is Airbnb friendly, and some of the Jersey Shore towns trying to get rid of it because not everyone is as responsible as you are when it comes to who they allow to stay in their properties. And you have 15 or 20 underage kids in there drinking and causing a ruckus in a family neighborhood. Have you faced any regulatory challenges or obstacles with your vacation home in Cape May specifically?
It's interesting. Let's see. The tax laws are weird.
Okay.
So one of the things that was a gotcha when I was filing my taxes is if I rent the apartment through Airbnb, there's like a premium. I want to say it's like a 10 to 14% price premium because you have to pay the state of New Jersey and or this township of Cape May. I forget who it was, but they split that 10% kicker between them
Mhm.
and they kept that revenue. So it's, if you called me up and said, hey, what would it cost in July? I'd look at my thing and I'd say, yeah, $3,100. But if you go through Airbnb, it's going to be $3,900 because
Right.
by the time Airbnb tax their fees on it and the government gets their fees in it, you got to pay for that. If you go through a realtor, believe it or not, you don't have to do that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which is very interesting, which I think is actually a smart move. It keeps the real estate market healthy and adds a level of service. The other thing about the real estate guys is that if something happens to the house, the real estate company's responsible for it,
Mhm.
not me. So the tenant reaches out to the real estate people, and it usually ended up being our real estate guy that would go over and fix the TV or call the refrigerator guy to fix the
Yeah.
refrigerator. So
And
that
the
was
fee.
one regulatory thing that I think was interesting. The other thing was it's not that big of a deal, but like when you have a property, you have to file separate tax returns or not separate tax returns, but separate tax forms to account for all the inventory and money that flows into it. So that was, I know the accountant complained about that a little bit. Being out of state, New Jersey, you have to file, I had to file another state tax form, which is a pain in the butt, but not a deal breaker. Those are the big things. In terms of the Airbnb piece, I know that Cape May's been pretty cool about it,
Good.
because they're getting that 10%, right? They don't want to let that go.
Right.
Uh, but I don't know. I don't know if you've ever been to Wildwood, where the boardwalks are at, or ever stayed in one of those flop houses. It's been happening at the shore for a long time. I
Yeah.
think this isn't new, right? This
Right.
is used as an excuse to complain, right?
Yeah.
So
On another note, from regulatory challenges, I want to talk about challenges in general, just because I want you have had great success, but I want to make sure that we're telling the full story here. Have there been any unexpected challenges or costs related to owning and renting out the vacation home? And how did you address them if they came up?
with the IRS depreciation schedule is, right? So it's a 25 years or 30-year amortization, right? So you take a property, that's the useful life of the property. On average, you're going to spend X, Y, or Z to get stuff done. We got a little shed on the property. To replace the shed, it was $10,000.
Mm.
So that's a big nut. So that's a month of rent and that's got to come out from somewhere. And there's stuff like that pops up occasionally. I forgot to turn the pipes off in the winter one time. I burst the pipes and
Oh,
I had to go
no.
get the plumbers out to replace them, which was a pain in the butt, right? The air conditioning system blew. That ended up being putting another split unit in was like $1,400. So sometimes this stuff hits you, but you have to account, I was at 20 or 30% of your profits. You just go into a savings fund for certain emergencies. And that's the way that we put all of our beach income into one big fund and then we save it up. And then for the most part, we've been making money each year, but when it comes out, it's going to come out of the beach fund. And that's how we just do a simple envelope system for making sure that we make money.
Great. I used to do that too when I was younger. I really wanted to start the budget. I would have an envelope with eating out, haircuts, clothes, and I would just put $5 in each one every time I like got paid every week when I was a kid. Well, I say kid, but I was probably in my early 20s then.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a lot easier than an Excel spreadsheet back then.
Yeah, exactly. No, man, you know what? I'm going to take my haircut money. I'm not going to get a haircut. I got another week,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Go
Oh,
get a steak tonight.
so now you have the long-term rental in Mount Airy, you have the
Mm,
vacation rental in Cape May, and you have Proper Sky. How
mm,
do you keep all three balls in the air? What does the juggling act look like? And don't forget
mm,
about the fourth ball that is your great, beautiful kids in your life. Talk to
mhm.
me about how you handle those responsibilities and commitments and your work-life balance.
So it's interesting. For me, I always looked at real estate as like an investment, right? So it's just diversification. Look, if the stock market goes to crap, at least I've got a couple of places
Mm,
to live. Because the other thing is, I don't know if you know this or not, but I bought the building that I'm in right now too with my business, right?
right.
So we use the SBA 504B program, which is an outstanding program. If you're a small business owner, you got a little bit of cash, you want to own the property that you're in. There's a lot of caveats to it, but it's a fantastic program. So I actually own that property now too. So that's the third one. Um, One of the things that I've done, so the thing that really started to happen for me is I found myself like, oh shit, I forgot to book James's soccer practice tournament. Oh my God, it's my mom's birthday and I haven't gotten her a gift yet. And I got to call my sister. Like all this little personal stuff just started piling up. And then the Airbnb with the flip each week, it was like every Saturday or Sunday, I was answering at least an hour with phone calls
Mm,
or emails or go back and forth. So I got a personal assistant. So I hired a personal assistant, and part of her job description is she helps me manage the Airbnb property. So she handles all that stuff. I introduced her to our property manager and the landscaper, and we have a whole operations guide. So she has a list of what she's allowed to do without me, charges that she's allowed to make without my request, without my authorization. And then if she gets stuck, she can ping me and ask me questions. So that was the first thing I handed off. And she's been performing admirably. She's been absolutely amazing with that. And then the second thing is all this little stuff that just slowed me up on my day-to-day basis. Like today, while we were on our talk, she registered my son for a 2-week soccer camp. She reminded my wife that we had a band camp tomorrow for my daughter to bring the trombone. And then she also booked a flight for me to Vegas over him today. So that stuff is, yeah, man, it's fantastic. And I didn't realize the impact it would have on my life overall. That little stuff adds up over and over again. And it takes a long time. You got to spend a lot of time training, and you need somebody smart
mhm.
to do it. But if you find a good personal assistant, it's transformative. It really makes a big deal.
Wow, that's great. I never really thought about it. Like I always thought that it was like such a luxury item. I would never see myself doing it. But the way you explain it, to take all that little stuff off your plate so you can focus on the main thing that's the main thing, it seems like it would be like this huge weight lifted off your shoulders.
It is, man. And so my assistant's a virtual assistant. She lives over in the Philippines. And so she's relatively inexpensive in the grand scheme of things. But for me, I've reached a point in my life where I've got enough money. I'm running out of time. Yeah, yeah, and I think you're probably feeling the same
Yep,
way,
yep.
dude. We're at the top of the hill and we're heading down now. It's okay. I need to maximize my enjoyment, make sure that the time that I spend is either quality or what I want to do. Right. And the more I can take this sort of stuff that slows us down, the more my life improves.
It's funny that you said that time and money. When we were younger, Emily and I told Emily we were gonna go visit my sister in Hawaii. She's, oh, we can never afford it. Now we were both, this was before Michael was born, before we had kids. I was working part time, I think, at the time. I was like, no, we're going to go. I was like, are you going to say on your deathbed that you remember that time that we put that money in the bank and saved it for a year? Or do you remember when we went to Hawaii for the first time? Is that going to be the memory? Remember? And ever since, and it wasn't something I really thought of or I made a philosophy out of, but ever since then, I have, right? So it came out just like from the hip because I was just trying to convince her that we should go. And then, you know what? That was pretty effing profound. That's the way I should live. Sure, I could save this money and put it in the bank and do whatever, but money or time, what do I want to spend? I'm going to spend the money and make experiences. And
Yep.
I want to spend my time doing great things that I'm going to remember and making experiences for the people around me. In a couple of weeks, we're going to Jamaica, taking the kids. Um,
Awesome, dude.
yeah, it's the first time I didn't get to leave the country until I was in my 40s. And Oliver's going to be 4 years old. He's got a passport already.
It's amazing, right?
That's a nice moment to be able to do something like that. And we're going to spend a week down there. And it's just, and that it just goes to the philosophy of if you can do it now because you don't know, tomorrow might never come. What are we waiting for?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, right? I look at, because in the context of real estate, right? So it seems like we're talking about both sides of the coin here, right? So I'm investing in real estate, but at the same token, I'm spending money with personal assistance so I can free myself up for time.
Mhm.
And it's like, you got to collect the assets, right? If you don't, you're a dummy, right? So that's everybody that's listening to this podcast is collecting assets, right? That's the game, right? So you need to have something to hand off, right? That's how you create generational wealth, right? There's 3 phases in your life, in my opinion: learn it, earn it, return it, right?
Yeah.
So you spend your formative years learning on how to, this really smart thing he told me one time, I'll never forget it. And he said, you spend your formative years trying to figure out how to make money, right? How to do what you're going to do, learning how to do your job. And then once you do it, you make money. And then you get to a certain point where you have enough and it's your responsibility to give it back. And right now I'm in the earning phase where I'm stretching that out. But philosophically, I'll trade an experience for anything material any day of the week, right? To your point, even at the behest of fortune or fame or anything like that. Like I'll take a concert over a nice pair of shoes every day of the week, right? Or some beer with buds. You know what I mean?
Same.
That's, you know, that for me, that's what life's about. And I think that's what I'm ultimately trying to get to. How do I do that every day?
Jim, this has been a wonderful conversation. It's coming up to the end, and I want to talk to you about something you might not even remember, but it had a huge impact on my life and my career trajectory. And I think it helped me become the success I am today. So I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you because there was a time when I first got my real estate license, and you asked to have lunch with me because you were interested in buying an office building for your business Proper Sky. And I was sure. And I took the meeting because as a young realtor, you don't say no to anything because you don't know any better. And we sat down. I think we went to a place in Manayunk. And I have to say, I left that meeting thoroughly embarrassed.
No.
And I'm not sure if you knew. So if you didn't, if you did, I appreciate you not rubbing it in. But I did not know anything about commercial real estate. I barely knew anything about residential real estate. And I definitely didn't know anything about multifamily or investments. And we discussed all three. And I'm sad to say that you educated me more than I did you as a realtor or as a professional in real estate. You know, I was brand new, but I should not have taken that. I should have said, Jamie, I'm not ready for this yet. But what it did do is it lit a fire on to go out and never let that happen to me again. I know that your friendship has been one of the key things that gotten me to where I am today, because that means me on the course of to never be unprepared again. And I just wanted to tell you that uh, I should have told you that privately, but as I have in here,
I like crying, dude.
I've told the story. I've told the story on a couple episodes now where it doesn't matter where you start, but it matters where you finish. And I use this story, and I've never mentioned any names, and I'm sure the listeners were wondering. Now, everybody, it was Jim Smith. I owe a great deal of gratitude. I just wanted to get that out there because I know the story has been told a couple times in different episodes. Before we end this one, I wanted to make sure I give Jim the credit that he so deserves.
Dude, I'm flattered. I really am. I really am, Mike. And I think the thing I love about you, man, like we've been friends for a long time. You learn from your mistakes. If you didn't take that meeting and you would have said no, you never would have improved. So I think the thing that I try to instill in my children is do it. Apologize later. Figure it out. And I was listening to the podcast before I was driving into work today, and you were talking about ARV and like your flip rates. And I was like, Jesus Christ, this dude knows so much more. Then I was like, I didn't even know what you're talking about. I got to a certain point in the podcast and I had to pause. I was like, wait, hold on. Let me try to figure this math out. And I was like, what an incredible journey. I'm glad that I was able to travel, even though a small piece with you, and I really appreciate it. And I think you turned into a remarkable realtor, and you're just a hell of a guy, man. I'm glad that we know each other. So thank you.
I appreciate that. I feel the same way. Jim, I want to thank you now just for spending about a half hour with me today, going over this stuff. I'm sure the listeners loved it. And if anybody's out there in need of IT services, can they reach out to you? Like, what's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, just go to propersky.com and then just call us or email us or whatever. Yeah, sales@propersky.com. Yeah, it's probably the easiest way to do it. I got dudes that do this for me now, Mike.
Awesome. I appreciate you, sir. You have a great day.
You too, man. This is great, man. I loved it. Thanks so much, Mike.
You're welcome. I just want to thank the listeners for listening to another episode of the Hungry Realtor Podcast with me, Mike Severns, and Jim Smith. Please make sure to like, follow, and share on all the social medias and podcast platforms. And that wraps up another episode of the Hungry Realtor Podcast.